Can you hear me? All right. No, it's not working, right? Yeah, I don't think it's loud as good. I'll just speak up then. I wrote this book because in seminary, I didn't think Asian Americans mattered. I was fast running away from everything Asian American because I thought all that was all toxic and worthless. So in seminary, I realized, wait a minute. And actually, I went to seminary because I wanted to get the pure theology that came from heaven through Calvin and Luther, right? In my mind, I was like, this is basically what theology is supposed to be. So I studied that really well, and I realized if I want to do this is basically what I realized. I realized that Luther was doing theology for the Lutheran context. It's very, very clear. I mean, I studied Luther so much, right? And Calvin's doing theology for his Swiss, French context. And of course, if you like me, if you like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, modern German context, right? This is where he's wrestling with. And here's Daniel Lee studying theology and doing theology for the modern German context, and I didn't think it made sense. If I want to copy them and learn from them, I have to take on who I am, which I found to be very frustrating. I was like, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to go in that direction because I think that's actually how I thought about it in my mind. So that's been a long journey for me to make sense of who I am and how do I make sense of like how God leads us to do theology, to ministry. So it's a book that I wish I had when I was in seminary to just kind of understand what in the world is going on. And I kind of, in the introduction, talk about the fact that I'm kind of stumbling like in the dark, trying to make some sense of all this stuff. And hopefully my 20 years of stumbling, you can learn some, you don't have to go through the same process, is actually what the idea is. It's from a class I've taught for about a decade at Fuller Seminary called Asian American Identity and Ministry. When I first got to Fuller, my title was Assistant Professor of Theology and Asian American Studies. But after a while, I realized I wasn't teaching Asian American, it was Professor of Theology and Asian American Ministry. But I realized I couldn't teach ministry because nobody knew what it meant to be Asian American. Right? How can you do theology or ministry when we barely understand who we are? So I became Professor of Theology and Asian American Studies. I just started teaching Asian American Studies. And how does that make sense with who we are, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time summarizing the book, but can you go back? So the book, so for a lot of people, the book is quite academic because I think we need this foundation. I'm actually working on a more layperson book right now. But for ministers and people who actually have master's degrees, this is something I think you should find helpful, right? So the book is dedicated to my wife, and she said the first two chapters are some of the hardest. It's because theoretically I'm trying to lay a foundation. This is actually how I recommend people read the book. If you don't like heavy-duty theology, I say read the last two chapters first. You see what the point is. And then go back to chapter 3. You read the introduction, but I would skip chapter 1 and 2 altogether. Because it's just heady, right? So, and then from there on, you can read whatever chapters you want, right? Basically, this is basically what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, what does it mean to be Asian American? And a lot of us have definitely undergraduate degree, master's degree. Some of them has doctorate degree. But in terms of what it means to be Asian American, a lot of us don't have that level of articulation, right? So I'm trying to give you that level of articulation when we talk about Asian Americanness. So I say, hey, look, what if we imagine ourselves as fish in water? And we can think about different aspects of Asian Americanness, right? What makes up Asian American experience? Well, one thing that's there, as we know, is next slide. Asian heritage, whatever it may be, right? I'm Korean American, so it would maybe involve Confucianism and Taoism and shamanism and Buddhism. But if you're Indian American and you're still Asian American, you might have Hinduism, you might have the Martama Christianity, you might have different aspects of what that looks like. So some kind of Asian heritage. And what else is in the water that makes up who we are? It's migration experience. Maybe you're a refugee. Maybe you came, you're fourth generation Chinese American. But whatever the experience is, it still makes up who you are, right? And also American culture in terms of because we've been impacted by everything that we've learned in our studies, in how Asian Americans are represented in the U.S. that impacts us as well. All that. And the last part of it is racialization, how we have been racialized together. A lot of us have different kind of ethnic background, but all of us are all Asian American. What does that mean historically, that actually is a thing that we have to negotiate? So next slide is, the middle slide is gender and other things. So I just say this is all basically lectures for my class, right? So all this we're all trying to make some sense of this. And the more you understand what these elements are, the better you'll be able to understand and tell your own story, right? Because if you have a very base level of what that is, you will tell your story in a very crude way. Like how I used to. I'll be like, well, that's my Koreanness. I'm like, Korea has like 3,000 years of history. Korea is a complex nation. What do you mean by Koreanness? Well, when I was growing up, whatever was negative, right? Whatever was bad, like that's Koreanness. That's what Korean men are. That's what Korean church are. That's what Korean pastors are. My friend Ken Fong used to say he grew up with the word Chinesey. It's like, oh, it's Chinesey. Grandma smells like tiger balm and bitter melon and what? That's Chinesey, right? And I was like, China has 5,000 years of history. It's a middle kingdom. How in the world are you using the word Chinesey that way? That's literally kindergarten level of articulation. And he had like a doctorate degree. That's basically what the problem is. We should be able to articulate things at that level. And that's what we're trying to do. So that's basically it. I mean, you just have to read the book.